Welcome to Caffeine and Concepts with Shilpi, the podcast where we deep dive into the realms of digital transformation, business strategy, and artificial intelligence. I'm Shilpi Sharma, your host and seasoned strategist in integrating cutting-edge technology and business processes. Each episode, we will explore innovative solutions and disruptive strategies that drive market leadership and business excellence. Whether you're a business leader, a strategist, or simply a tech enthusiast, join me as we dissect complex concepts and turn them into actionable insights that can propel your professional journey forward. Welcome to another episode of Caffeine and Concepts with Shilpi. Today's guest is Dr. Rajiv Garg, who is an associate professor of information systems and operations management at Goizueta Business School at Emory University. His research focuses on the economic and social implications of digital technologies, algorithms, and human-machine interactions. Dr. Garg's research has been presented over 60 times at various international conferences worldwide. Additionally, Dr. Garg has been advising various for-profit, non-profit, and government organizations develop data-enabled digital strategies and public policies. Now, beyond his academic explorations, Dr. Garg enjoys hiking, biking, hot yoga, and discovering new vegan food spots around the city. I think you and I, Rajiv, need to speak about some hiking spots. I'm a huge hiker as well, so excited about that.
Awesome.
Our
Awesome.
topic today is Privacy Matters, navigating the tightrope of data personalization and protection. We live in a world where every click, scroll, and interaction feeds an algorithm designed to understand us better than we understand ourselves. Businesses rely on this data to enhance customer experiences, optimize services, and even predict behaviors. But as AI gets smarter, the lines between convenience and intrusions blur. That's why today we're diving into the delicate balance between AI-driven personalization and user privacy, and why regulation is no longer just an option but a necessity. So where do we draw the line? How can businesses deliver hyper-personalized experiences without crossing ethical and legal boundaries? And as consumers, what can we do to take back the control of our data? To help us unpack these questions, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Rajiv Garg with me today. Rajiv, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shilpi. That's a very kind
Rajiv,
introduction.
of course. Rajiv, we hear about data breaches, AI-driven tracking, and even governments taking a lighter approach to regulation in the name of innovation. But why does data privacy truly matter? Can you help us break it down in terms of both at an individual level as well as businesses? And what are the real risks if organizations don't take this seriously?
So that's a good question, Shilpi. Now, data privacy is essentially poses the risk associated with identity theft, surveillance of individuals, and misuse of the personal data. Uh, we have seen repeatedly many stories where the private information being lost of an individual is misused by somebody else for their monetary gains or for essentially defaming the individuals as well. And so as a result, people should care about their data, about their information. There is this um, sort of a quote. I remember somebody said, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product, right? And even our Vice President JD Vance said this in the AI summit yesterday or day before. But this was said before many times, and the reason there is essentially organizations are offering us so much or in platforms, so many things to do. In return, they want our data. They want to understand human. Right now, the algorithms are mature enough to essentially create a persona of any individual, what your likes, dislikes are, how you're going to behave, how you're going to act in any given scenario, right? So as a result, as a company, I want to know that information to target something to you. Maybe from an organization point, assuming there is no theft, no surveillance, no misuse of data, but from an organization point of view, I want the personal data to target information to make you consume something that essentially triggers those cells in your brain saying, I want this right now, right? The organizations want that to happen. And this is why they essentially use this data to create the personalized or hyper-personalized systems. I mean, Netflix, for example, their algorithm is said to be accurate 99.99% of the time. The movies they recommend, you will like watching them. That's phenomenal. But we're glued to the TV more often, right? We're consuming the information more and more. Same thing with TikTok. On an average, a human's attention span in today's world is that of a goldfish, which is about 5 seconds. But on TikTok, on an average, we're spending an hour because the algorithms that are built with our personal data are triggering those essentially cognitively the actions, the decisions in our brain to do things that may not be as healthy, as effective, or good for us, right? It gives us the joy in that moment. That's essentially a positive utility from economics point of view. But in the long term, it is harmful. And this is why we should care about where data is being used, how it's being used.
I agree, Rajiv. So to your point, right? Me getting a personalized list of my Netflix likes and dislikes, and you're right, they are very, very accurate. That's not a big deal. I'm as a user, as a consumer, I am willing to share that type of data. However, something as critical as financial data, right? I'm skeptical about sharing that. I'm skeptical about how it may be and used. To your point regarding TikTok, right? There are some harmful aspects to what it can also denote because it also gives you an environment which is basically an echo chamber. At this age that I'm at, I can differentiate because I'm very, very self-aware, and I grew up in an era of no technology, right? So I'm able to step back. However, the young kids now, right now, that's all they're growing up to in, and I think it's very scary the kind of data that is being fed to them and how it's shaping their minds.
Absolutely.
So, from an
Absolutely. Yeah.
organization perspective or from a individual perspective, this becomes. I think there is a responsibility aspect and there is a understanding aspect from organization and individual respectively, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. I mean, I also, by the way, grew up in the era where we had rotary phones, right? So
I remember those days.
Um, but the point is, so when you mentioned that you're willing to share the data with Netflix, and I think this is a very common mindset that our data is being used to do something good for us, right? So I think this is what the current generation thinks. If I am sharing my watch history with Netflix, my recommendations that are provided are better. If I am essentially watching something on TikTok, my recommendation that are provided to me are better. I enjoy those in the moment, right? So that's one thing that you're right that we believe it's a norm to essentially share this information to get a return which is enjoyable in the moment. In addition, if you were to think about the data privacy thing, a lot of these apps collect the information on your devices outside of their app itself, right? So you're watching Netflix, but you go and search for some other movie on your phone, or you're talking with a friend about a movie, and it's able to hear, understand, use that information in recommending the movies. That's maybe a little scary, right? That is where they should be controlled. Now, for some people like us, maybe it's okay because we are more open to sharing data because we like everything personalized. But for some individual, they should have the control where it's not okay, right? So Apple, for example, in 2021, they created this feature called app tracking transparency, where they would give a pop-up message saying, do not ask the app not to track me. Right. So we wrote a paper around it. So we tried to understand what is the effect of consumer behavior on it. And at that time, what we found was, I mean, companies like Meta that were collecting the information from different apps on their phone itself, they lost $10 billion because they couldn't personalize the information, the ads, the content with the information that was sitting on the phone outside of Facebook, right? And unfortunately, what we saw in our research that people care about it when others talk about privacy. When we stop talking about it, like the moment when the Apple released this, everybody was talking about it. We saw a significant drop in the app downloads, the app revenues over the next 6 months. But people's behavior, like it started shifting, right? It started shifting to I'm going to allow, or I'm going to just ask the app not to track, or I won't even look at what data it's collecting. I'm just going to download the app right now. The same thing happened with the GDPR, right? When GDPR was released, and every website would say, "This is all the data they're going to share. Do you want to accept or reject?" Initially, we were looking at what information is shared. We were clicking reject or allow only uh, more important cookies or more important information to be shared. Nowadays, if we believe the website is trustworthy, we just accept all the data sharing policies. We don't even look what data any website is collecting, right? So you're right that this generation, because so much information is bombarded on them, our behavior is influenced constantly, either in consuming something that is personalized to them or essentially ignoring these kind of privacy regulations. So we have to keep reminding them, look, your data is important. It is actually the gold mine for the future models, future algorithms, for all the organization. Be mindful of who you're sharing with.
I'm going to come back to the GDPR question, but this is for our audience. Dr. Rajiv mentioned that there were some articles that he was referring to. So any articles that we discussed during our conversation today, I'm going to be putting the details and the links to those articles at the bottom of this podcast. All right, going back to your point regarding regulatory landscape, GDPR is what you mentioned, right? So EU's GDPR is fairly, how do I say, robust, and it's fairly strict as well. Now, US seems to be pushing for more of a hands-off approach to AI and data privacy. So I wanted to pick your brain on what does this mean for businesses and consumers, and are we at risk for falling behind in global data privacy standards?
Yeah, so we are already behind. There's actually, I mean, definitely EU, and I mean within US, California has also created the privacy regulations as well. But we, again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to word the things carefully because of the recent AI summit. Uh, Innovation is important. Innovation, the opportunities with AI are great, but unchecked innovation or unregulated innovation could be harmful. So this is something we need to keep in mind. GDPR is a good guideline to protect the data. We need to have similar regulations in place. Maybe they should be very soft regulations right now. They should be essentially allowing the innovation in such a way that it benefits the society overall, right? But if there is an innovation that is likely to cause harm, with the data they collect, with the practices that are not ethical, that are not responsible, we need to eliminate. We need to have guidelines that prevent organizations from doing that. Right now, essentially, I mean, a company can say, look, I'm going to give you this AI large language model access. You give me access to the data on your laptop, and I'm going to tune it for you, right? It's a great feature. It's essentially phenomenal that an AI model is fine-tuned on the data that is sitting on my laptop. We probably will jump on that sort of a idea right now. But as we don't even look that what are they doing with that data, how secure that information is. You could collect the entire information, social security numbers, bank statements, passwords, everything is on our computer, right? If that is lost and this company does not have governance policies controlling how this data is being used, we're going to see an increasing number of data breaches. I mean, privacy, the identity theft, and a lot of other privacy related issues, right? So we do need, and we are behind. We, when I say as United States, or actually a significant number of countries in the world are behind in creating these policies, at least some baseline responsible AI policies to sort of inform the organizations, to force the organization to protect our data. Because data moving forward, this is another article that I wrote 2 years ago. It's in a magazine where I said every private data that you have is going to become an even bigger gold mine for corporations. Whatever data they have, right? We are seeing all these large language models, all these AI systems becoming more and more mature. But there's going to be time they're going to start saturating. They're going to start saturating because there is only the same data that you're training on. You're applying different algorithms, you're modifying different algorithms, but there is a certain level of accuracy you can reach. The only way they can innovate further is access to the data. A large language model company can come to another client or corporation. They say, I want to deploy AI for essentially my workforce. And the language model company can say, look, you give us access to your data, we're going to put it on the server, and then we're going to tune the model. Now, is this tune model being used somewhere else? Is this tune model being used to fine tune their internal foundation models as well? In another paper, this is also one we recently published, we saw there is a data leakage that happens, right? So if you anchor the information correctly, the prompt, the question, which is essentially everybody's talking about, we need to do prompt engineering. If you prompt it correctly, if you build the right RAG models, the information that you get from the language model is going to be very similar to the information I get if we were prompting the question very similarly. We were anchoring it on a domain itself. So that data leakage could be an issue. Now, the companies need to ask these questions from their vendors of the AI model providers, right? And to protect their own data, because that's a gold mine. But every organization wants that gold mine because they want to do better than everybody else.
So speaking of the delicate balance between innovation and data privacy, right? I completely get the aspect that we're still basically in the start of this journey, right? And data definitely is a massive piece of its success. And governance, of course, is an essential aspect of it. Challenges in implementing these privacy matters. That's a pretty big deal, right? And I know corporations that are dedicated to data privacy, to security, are working towards it, right? But what do you see companies like? How do you see companies dealing with this? What are the kind of things that is it a technology problem that they're dealing with? Is it a regulatory compliance problem that they're dealing with, or is it a cultural or an operational problem that they're dealing with to get data privacy, I guess, framework in their organizations? Any
I
thoughts?
mean, I would say all of the above. I mean, it definitely starts with the culture. If the culture, and which is where I like Apple, like Apple's culture has been phenomenally to protect every single consumer data. It's embedded in their mind that you can't access the data that is not meant for you. They have a very solid data governance policies, right? So essentially, if you create a culture where every individual is thinking, is informed what data they can access, what data they cannot access, and maybe it's not just can or cannot, should or should not. Maybe it's a better term, right? I mean, because they're connected to these databases and say, look, these are the things that you should not gain access to or use for any decision making. When you create a culture like that, any regulatory compliance a government creates, they're very easy to adopt. If you don't have that culture and you create those policies, they will be very hard to adopt because the companies will then be scrambling to say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to inform the or train the employees. It's going to take a much longer time. The technology part is relatively easier in today's world. The technology has matured enough that the data governance could be managed, very easily by having sort of a data governance team of very few people, or even there are a lot of companies that provide cloud services. They sort of use AI-based systems to enable, to help with the data governance policies as well. So technology-wise, we are, I think, very mature in enabling these policies, these solutions. But if there's nobody telling us that we should do this, why should I do it in the first place, right? If I can make more money by essentially accessing the data, targeting the customers better, keeping them hooked to my platform, my products, my services more, I'm going to do it because nobody's telling me it's wrong. So the government has to create the policies and essentially then the organizations deploy. So they will invest in that technology, which is very easily available. So the hardest thing is culture. Once you create a culture, government needs to have policies in place for the companies to deploy and use the technology to enable the data privacy and
And
security.
Rajiv, I think I love the fact that you brought in culture into this conversation, right? And I think no matter what technology that we are bringing into a firm, I think culture, people play a huge role in its adoption, in its success. I do have it's an intriguing thought, right? So most of the companies nowadays, right, are at least the big ones that are investing in AI at an enterprise level are global companies. They're massive companies, right? And globally, not the same culture doesn't exist in these companies. So and I'm going to use Microsoft because I work there. Microsoft US be having a slightly different culture than, say, Microsoft Hong Kong, right, or a Microsoft China, well, Germany, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how I think that's a very broad set of things, right? So you can't necessarily employ the same maybe framework or checks and balances perhaps. You may have to take a slightly different customized approach on how you're going to manage the challenges that you deal with when it comes down to regulating, I guess, AI and
Yes,
what
yeah,
can be
yeah.
done within the various cultures that you're
Gotcha.
dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
So
No, I think you're spot on. But my quickest response would be AI can help personalize. AI can help personalize the cultures too. Can tell us what we need to do in every country, right? What regional norms are there. It's very hard unless you are living there to figure that out.
yeah,
But you can, I mean, very simply now ask a generative AI system, like, here's the policies in the America or EU around the data privacy, and I want to modify this to fit the culture in, say, Africa,
yeah.
right? It will do a phenomenal job, and especially with those reasoning models. So the question I'm breaking in two parts. One, how do you want to adopt the culture in creating these policies in your organization? That is relatively easy part on what you need to change. The second part is execution. Second part is onboarding the managers, the leaders in those areas. That is a trickier part, right? If those leaders, those managers in those countries, those regions are not bought into the idea that this is what we need to follow to protect the data, even if it means there is a loss of revenue, at least in the short term. What we're gaining is trust from the employees, trust from our partners that are out there to essentially do more business with us. So the long term, in my opinion, and I don't have evidence for this, unfortunately, no paper on this part, is the long
This is the
term,
next one.
there's going to be no effect on the revenue if a company is complying with the good data management, data privacy, data security practices, right? Short term, they may see because of those constraints that we can do these things and we may end up losing revenue. But there are a lot of different ways they can essentially do a very similar thing without knowing the data. I mean, take, for example, a very simple thing. So, Apple's mail privacy protection policy. So, if you open an email in any platform, right, be it Hotmail, Gmail, essentially anytime you open an email or you read an email, there's a notification that is sent to the server that you opened this email, that you read this email at this time. Apple prevents that from happening. So it's a very simple thing. Now, if you think about a company that is tracking when you send emails, right, or when you read emails, I'm going to send you the right email targeted to you at that time, right? Versus sending it at, say, a midnight every night, or a newsletter or some marketing email, right? So now you're personalizing when you're advertising potentially to customers or when they're likely to read your email that could influence your behavior or your decisions in some way. So, but that small change, I mean, Apple, we trust now as a brand to protect our data, and there's significant number of consumers of Apple products, and it's growing. Whereas, I mean, for the other emails, they are doing better. They might be making more revenue, at least now, but is it going to sustain in the long term?
Yeah, I feel the more I see the world, I feel like consumerism is not going anywhere. I think it's
Yes.
going to stay. You know, so
Oh,
makes
we love consuming stuff. I mean,
we
this is a human nature.
it is. It is. As much as I tell myself every New Year's, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this much shopping and I'm not going to do this. And it's all about consumerism, right? And inevitably, if I consider myself 50%, in addressing the goals that I've set for the beginning of the year, I'm okay. Because I know
Yeah,
I will never reach the 100% of not buying anything at all. That doesn't happen. Something you mentioned,
that's true.
Rajiv, in your previous comment, right? That struck me from a global perspective, right? I know there have been talks in this past year regarding potentially having global committees, global ethical committees or global AI committees. Is that something that's still on the table for a lot of countries that are coming together to build out AI models?
I mean, so I would say, I mean, so when we say global, I don't think the countries or the companies are going to work together to create some global policies. I don't think it's going to work. But again, I don't know what is happening. But definitely, to your previous point, companies that have different cultures spread across the world, they definitely are going to bring the leaders together to see and identify what policies they create for all the different regions and the different cultures across the world, right? Um, Unfortunately, I'm not aware if there is a global initiative. I mean, this AI summit in Paris may
Yeah.
be doing some of that, but I mean, it's I mean, there's somebody's going to lose, somebody's going to win. So, in that scenario, like nobody's going to agree
Yeah.
to one common policy. They're going to say we're going to build our own policy, which essentially benefits us. So, this is unfortunately a situation globally with every country. I mean, it's me first kind of a approach.
And
So,
I can definitely understand that, right? Because I think this technology definitely has the potential to bring in so much revenue and put a country in a completely different economic bracket
yeah.
than some of the other technologies have been in the past. So I know we are still at I think from a bell curve perspective, I think we're still like maybe halfway, maybe, in the growth of this technology. But based on the research that you have done and Emory has done, or even what's going on currently in the market, what do you see as future trends and predictions? Like, what do you see as far as and I'm talking
Uh,
specifically around data privacy, regulation around that, and not the entire AI gambit, but in that area.
so, I mean, I think that's a great question. There's so many different answers. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit short. And again, so this is what I teach and I love about AI is so this year and moving forward is going to be the year for agentic workflows and small language models. The SLMs or on-device AI is going to dominate because of the data privacy. So, for example, Google has this Gemini Nano. A Nano can run on your device. One, I mean, there is a reduced power consumption, a reduced load on the grid, right? I mean, a single query on ChatGPT could consume almost as much as 10 watts of power, right? If we are asking essentially in any given day 100 queries, maybe 100 is too much. Let's just say 10 queries in a given day. We're essentially consuming power that's equal to two light bulbs, the traditional light bulbs, for an hour, right? And just 10 questions that we asked, right? So there is a huge load on the grid. And that's why every country right now is trying to invest in power to feed the need for these AI systems. Moving forward, that demand could be managed with small language models. We don't need to access that massive 300 billion parameter model every single time we run a query. DeepSeek did better because they actually distilled the information. They used a smaller version. We can use even smaller version. We can have 10 different SLMs on our devices, on our laptop. Microsoft did a phenomenal thing of launching that Copilot Plus PC. Copilot Plus PC could have a model running on your laptop at all times to give you the information to help you, like optimize different tasks, optimize and rewrite text, do things for you, automate things for you, right? Because the AI is sitting on your device. Apple Intelligence is doing the same thing. Apple Intelligence is running on your device, although the number of features that it has is very limited, but it's going to grow over time. So the moving forward, we're going to see a significant growth in these small language model, on-device language model, which are going to help protect the data because now you're not sharing anything over the internet to any cloud services. You're doing everything on your phones, on your laptops, on your devices. So that's the future trend, I think, that every company should think about, that are essentially putting a product in the hands of a customer, a digital product, an app, a shopping engine, Netflix. They should say, look, I'm going to build a customized, a personalized model for you, a small language model that's going to sit on your phone. I'm not going to collect any data. Now, if you're talking about a movie with a friend and the phone hears, but it's only their model, the local phone that is seeing the information, is pulling the information for you from the Netflix, this is what you should watch, maybe we are okay because we're not sharing the information with the corporation broadly. Our preferences are not essentially being used to essentially recommend something else to somebody else at a different time, right? So these SLMs, which is, I mean, this is the world of AI. I mean, everything is going to center around AI moving forward. And I'm not saying this year, I mean, AI is here already.
Yeah.
We're going to keep innovating. And these SLMs are going to help with managing the privacy of our information, of our data on our devices. So it's going to grow. I mean, that's my expectation for at least this short term.
And that sounds much more, I guess, safer, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word, from a data perspective. And I think as a user, I'm constantly, I'm curious, so I'm constantly reading, and there's so much out there that's happening, right? So what I would kind of conclude this with, what advice, Rajiv, would you give to businesses, that are trying to get more personalized information to market marketing done to their end users, but also at the same time still maintain their privacy, the user privacy. And I want you to kind of give some advice to the businesses as well as individuals like me who assuming, say, I'm not tech savvy at all, and I'm a regular Joe Schmo mom, and who is also very concerned about me and my family's data. What would you advise to the businesses as well as individuals?
So I mean, that's a tough question. Should be there. For businesses, my approach would be think, say, responsible systems first, right? So have some team, some understanding of governance for data and AI. Government may not be telling you right now what to do, but they will tell you. I mean, any country that might think we don't need the governance because we want to focus on innovation, it's going to change because the way AI could be used to harm individuals is just massive. The impact on society is going to be massive moving forward. So the governments will have to step in. US government has done a good job. They created a US AI safety consortium, and they have multiple task force within it to help develop some guidelines. So be aware of those guidelines, have a governance team, and definitely you need to focus on your core business, how to improve the business with data that could be depersonalized in some way. The personalization element could be localized to consumer devices, consumers' own accounts itself. How can you do that? How can you limit the sharing of information across different accounts, right? So that's sort of the one thing for corporations. I mean, AI could be used, and AI is such a big thing, like analytics, machine learning, deep learning, everything falls under AI, including the large language model. So, I mean, you can deploy AI for literally every single business process and improve every single process with AI, but you need to keep in mind, like an approval from the data governance, AI governance team on what we need to do. Is it right? Is it okay to connect with this data, store this data, fine tune with this data? And maybe make recommendations and the target the marketing ads and stuff with this data, right? So those are simple questions that will be easily asked depending on what data you're talking about. I mean, the data governance is a very mature solution out there. If you want to learn, I would definitely come to Emory and take some of our courses.
I
Now,
would love to do that.
Um, for the consumer side, I would say so. A lot of us, I mean, working in the corporate sector, we go through this mandatory IT training every single year, right? But it happens once a year. It happens only once a year where they tell you this is phishing. These are the ways they could be doing a phishing attack. Don't share your password here. Don't do this, etc. That IT training we do once a year, when we do it, for the next few weeks, few months, we remember our actions are more responsible as individuals, right? But we need that kind of a training, one, more frequently, maybe every 6 months. And maybe not mandatory, but we need to tell people, look, these are potential harms of AI, of systems right now that you should be aware of maybe every 6 months so people remember. In my own research, when we saw people start forgetting, stop caring, that time period is 6 months, right? So if you keep giving them that information again, maybe a shorter, quick course on here is a 30-minute course that you need to revisit to essentially protect your information, protect companies' data, and protect, I mean, all different digital assets that are around you. The second thing that the government should do is create these sort of programs for different demographics around the country itself. That does not happen. There's so many people who are vulnerable, who share their information readily, right? All these scamming phone calls and the loss of the identity and everything happens because people just don't know. If government can say or run programs where they give the videos, it's something like that 30-minute video that everybody should watch, or they run in-person sort of events where, I mean, you're doing a carnival. During a carnival, there's a 30-minute session on using AI and technology for just any population. Both my dad and mom, like their accounts were hacked at one point, right? Because they didn't know that clicking on a link, sharing over the air two-factor authentication pin could be dangerous, right? But I mean, when they asked me, I told them, okay, they now know, right? So, but we need that sort of information and diffusion, or this sort of a learning platform for these individuals around the world, right, and around the country, and it should be free. Like this is something, the best practices of using Chat GPT, or best practices for using your phone, kind of, right?
And Rajiv, you've hit the nail on the head regarding the scamming, right? So I have a story with my parents as well, right? They belong to a generation where usage of digital phones was to call a person and that's it. And my father, this was a few months ago, received a call asking, imitating his insurance agent's voice, stating that you haven't paid your insurance bill, life insurance bill, you need to pay it, you can do it online, you don't need to come, my father is older, so on and so forth, right? My father being, and I think that's one of the things with that generation, they're slightly more, because they're not comfortable with auto payments and all of that, he was like, no, I think I'm going to come in. And he went in, and it was realized at that point in time that it was a scam. But how
Yeah,
many folks, who would end up paying, or who would
yeah, yeah.
end up, because they think that the person that they're talking to, because the voice is also imitated, is the person that they know. And you're right. I think that not just that demographic. To your point, I think every demographic requires a different way of learning and education, of course,
Yeah, yeah.
around this subject. And to your point, it's not just about leveraging ChatGPT, it is about using our phones or emailing or payments that are done online. So many small things that we end up getting bombarded with, and we don't recognize that which one is a scam and which one is not, because the differences are
It's
nuanced and slim. So
yeah, that
I
is
hear
so
you.
true.
I
Yeah.
hear you. This was and I know this is a very very deep subject, and I know it's constantly and consistently going to be evolving, as time comes by. And I know there is no shortage of the potential frauds and scamming and the things that can go wrong. However, I love the fact that I think most organizations and countries are working very, very diligently and taking this subject fairly seriously, and in how they are laying it out. Um, any
Yeah.
last thoughts? Any closing thoughts, Rajiv?
So I would say, I mean, when you mentioned the different country, one of the things that US is behind is that's two-factor authentication, right? I mean, if we make it sound so complex and people are hesitant, reluctant in signing up because it adds complexity. It should be a norm. It's a norm in a lot of different countries around the world. I mean, for example, in India, they call it OTP, over the air password, right? Keep it simple. Have a word, like in my opinion, that essentially says you need to have OTP or 2FA, like connected with the phone, where you get a second password in that moment that you use to validate that this is the right organization that you're talking to. This will help us, like as citizens, protect our data, protect our information. And you need to see where it's coming from. Is it your bank that is sending that OTP, right? Before you start talking about anything with the person on the phone, right? Or essentially logging into a site and it's sending an OTP, right? Is it coming from your bank or is it coming from a different entity? So the two-factor authentication, in my opinion, is a necessity for every individual. So if anyone hasn't signed up, right, for any of their accounts, they should, right? So that would be essentially the closing. That's the first step in protecting your data, protecting yourself, protecting your information.
And thank you for bringing that up. I think that's essential, and we'll definitely provide some links for those who do not know what OTP is, or how to go about setting up their two-factor authentication. I'll go ahead and put some links on the details of this podcast.
Awesome.
This was excellent, Rajiv. I have a feeling I think we're going to have another one in a few months again, because there's going to be progression within this field, and there's a lot coming in our way. So thank you so much for your time and your great insights. I am looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you, Shilpi.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me. Yeah.
Thank you.